Hi everyone, thank you for joining me tonight with Bedtime Story with Kip. My name's Haley Wagner. I'm an instructional supervisor at Keystone, and tonight we are going to be reading An Adventure for Wendy, Peter Pan related story. Peter Pan and the Lost Boys loved listening to Wendy's bedtime stories. Tinker Bell, too, never missed a telling. They all delighted in her gripping tales of swashbuckling pirates, hidden treasures, and magical pixie dust. But one night during story time, the Lost Boys all looked bored. Even Michael and John found their sister's tale dull. "Please tell us a new story," Michael said. "Where will I find inspiration for a fresh story?" Wendy wondered aloud. Then it came to her. Wendy's bedtime stories all starred Peter Pan. Where will I find the inspiration for a fresh story? Wendy wondered aloud. Then it came to her. Wendy's bedtime stories all starred Peter Pan. All she needed was a brand new story with an adventure with Peter. The next morning, Wendy bounded out of bed, ready to join Peter Pan on an exciting excursion, but Peter was nowhere to be found. "I'm sorry, old chaps," John said, pushing up his glasses. "I saw Peter and Tink leaving extra early for their morning outing." "You need Peter Pan to have an adventure," declared Nibs. "What will you do, Wendy?" asked Toodles. It was true. Peter was always the daring hero of Wendy's stories, but Wendy wasn't concerned. "Now, boys, don't you worry," said Wendy. "I'll just have to create my own adventure." The Lost Boys looked doubtful, but Wendy was determined. "I'll head to the sea," she said. "There's always adventures to be had there." You can see all the Lost Boys. Whoop! The Lost Boys and Wendy. Yep. Wendy took a shortcut through a jungle on her way to the water. She ran under the rushing waterfall, skipped over the stepping stones, and greeted the hippopotamus that lived in the river. Then she looked up to see an orangutan family racing between the trees. "That looks like a grand time," Wendy exclaimed. "Finding an adventure can wait a little while longer, I'm sure." So Wendy joined the fun up above. She and the orangutan swung high above the ground from tree to tree to tree. "I wish I could spend all day with you," said Wendy when everybody stopped to rest, "but I'm in search for an adventure." She would not let the Lost Boys down. Wendy said goodbye to her new friends and headed towards the bluffs that met the sea. You can see Wendy swinging around with orangutans. As Wendy skipped past the shimmering mermaid lagoon, she heard someone cry out, "Help!" "Oh dear," gasped Wendy. A mermaid was stuck in a fishing net. Her friends were nowhere to be seen. Finding a bedtime story would have to wait again. Wendy dove into the water, swam towards the mermaid, and rescued her from the net. "Thank you for saving me," gushed the mermaid. "You're so brave. Won't you stay and play in the lagoon for a while?" Wendy and the mermaid splashed and laughed in the water. "This is so much fun," cried Wendy as she came up from a dip in the cove. "But I really must be going. I still have to find my adventure." She left the mermaid friend and went off to search for her bedtime story. Heading towards a rowboat moored at the dock. Once she reached the boat, Wendy thought she could finally start her adventure. Then she'd have a bedtime story to tell. But when Wendy arrived at the rowboat, she found Shmee trying to steal it. Her bedtime story would have to wait. She couldn't let Shmee take the Lost Boys' boat. You see him trying to steal the boat. "Now, Shmee, you leave that boat alone," warned Wendy. "It belongs to the Lost Boys." The pirate grinned. "You'll have to fight me for it first, little lass," he challenged. Wendy dueled with Shmee, using all the sword skills she learned from Peter and a few tricks of her own. Soon victory was hers, as was the boat. Her adventure could finally begin. But as Wendy looked at the sky, she saw the sun was setting on the horizon. It was time to head back. Wendy returned to the hideout feeling defeated. She'd failed to have an adventure. There would be no new bedtime story that night. She stood outside the hideout, knowing her friends would be disappointed, listening to the same old bedtime story. "There's always tomorrow," she thought as she climbed into the hideout. When the Lost Boys gathered round, Wendy apologized. "I'm sorry, boys. I meant to have a marvelous adventure today, but instead I swung through the trees with orangutans, saved a mermaid, and fought off a pirate." The Lost Boys listened in awe. Peter Pan was enthralled. Swinging from the trees, swimming in the lagoon, dueling with Smee. "Wendy, what a thrilling day you had!" Peter exclaimed. "You're so courageous," said John. The Lost Boys all agreed it was the best bedtime story they'd ever heard. "Hooray for Wendy!" they cheered. Looking back on her day, Wendy realized that they were right. She created her own adventure all by herself. What a wonderful feeling. And thank you so much for joining me today with that. That concludes our bedtime story with Kip. I hope you have a good night.